welcome to our session this morning, Bridging Divides, Advancing Sustainable Peace Through Dialogue and Cooperation. My name is Ivana Dragicevic, I come from Croatia, and before I introduce the panel, I'll start with a small personal story. When I was 16, like some of these young people who come here at Delphi at the audience, all of a sudden, in my 16-year-old mind, war has started. I ended up in shelter, I heard the air raid for the first time. Before that, on my television, I watched the revolution in Romania. I simultaneously watched a guy called Yasser Arafat from my childhood. I remembered people called Khomeini and Saddam Hussein. And with my 16 years of age, I was not falling in love. I was reading about international relations, wars, peacemaking, peace building, and a couple of months after that, the first UN helmets came to what we now know as former Yugoslavia. So listening these couple of days here in Delphi, really deep and meaningful and important discussions about ruptures in our international system, possibilities to fix them or change them, as we are in this year commemorating 80 years after the end of Second World War, thinking about what we can do to transition to new global order that can also be just prosperous and peaceful as we thought that post-Second World War will be. I'm really happy to introduce our panel today because I think we can try to map possibilities that we have in front of us in these times of, they say, disruption, disorder, revolution, that really creates anxiety in 16-year-olds around the world also. So, Nomi Bar-Yaacov, first and foremost, a peace negotiator, a person who was there beside the Secretary General of the UN, Boutros Boutros-Ghali, when the war in former Yugoslavia was going on. She is a fellow of Global Fellowship Initiative at the moment at Geneva Center for Security Policy, but her affiliations were so many of them that I cannot count them. So welcome, Nomi Bar-Yaacov. Next to me is Henri J. Barkey, Adjunct Senior Fellow of Middle East Studies at Council on Foreign Relations, Cohen Professor of International Relations at Lehigh. I don't know how to pronounce it right. Lehigh, right? University at USA. Henri is an old friend and one of the most precious minds we have here in Delphi every year, so thank you for being here, of a lot of them. Please allow me to express my adoration. And last but certainly not least, concerning his intellectual legacy and importance of Saudi Arabia as such in international relations at the current point of our time, is Mr. Asaad al-Shamlan, Director of European Studies Center at Prince Saud Al Faisal Institute for Diplomatic Studies. Welcome, it's always a pleasure to have you here also in Delphi.
Thank you.
So, as we are mapping things, we need to start with Mr. Trump because he says that he's the world's greatest peacemaker and negotiator. And as we talk about international architecture, possibility of peacemaking, dialogue, and cooperation in times like that, how can we at all look at the concepts of dialogue and cooperation in international relations in circumstances that we have right now? Maybe start from you, Henri.
Well, Trump is clearly a game changer. I think you had sent me a quote from, was it from Gramsci?
Yeah, we can go to Gramsci because a couple of years, I think someone quoted Gramsci here saying that basically, you know, when the old world is dying, new is not yet born, it's time for monsters. So, you know, where to begin to build this post-monster world?
So when she sent me the quote yesterday, I said, first she talks about Trump, then she brings up the question of monsters, and I was wondering whether she was making a connection between the two.
You decide.
But no, we are, it's actually an interesting question whether or not Trump really represents a major break or change in the international system. We don't know yet. Maybe it is, maybe it is not. Maybe it is, it represents some change, but not an enormous amount of change, or maybe it's going to influence people to actually take certain actions to prevent the same thing from happening. But clearly, the system is indeterminate. It's going through a major restructuring. But what we don't know at the moment, as I said earlier, is the importance or the size of the restructuring, right? But in periods of like this, leaders like Trump or other leaders, Trump is important not necessarily because of who he is, but because of the country he leads. I mean, there are other leaders around the world who are significant and have had enormous amount of impact in their region, but Trump's obviously impact is global, and global in a way in which no other leader can be. So we have to take him into account. So when you have such a disruptive force, right, it is a period of fear. It's a period of insecurity. It will lead to other shall we say, ripple effects everywhere, and those ripple effects some places can be fairly significant. But at the same time, it is also a wake-up call, and it gets people to think of alternatives, think of ways of combating a disruptive force. Now, later on, I don't want to jump into what else I'm planning to say. But look, we've had periods like that in the past. Usually, they're not necessarily associated with a leader. You may have a leader emerge. I mean, think of the 1929 stock market crash, right? There was no leader then. Something did happen. And it gave rise to all kinds of other things, including Mussolini and Hitler, etc. So, and World War II, obviously. In this particular case, what to me is interesting with respect to Trump is what was there before that caused this Trump to emerge, and then we can talk about that later.
Nomi, you really have, huge legacy in peacemaking, arbitration, mediation, high levels, back channels, you name it. You have been on the front lines wherever I can think of. But at this time, where do you see this, let's say, key force of peace building in today's world? Because we have a global institutional disorder, you name it, and we have loads of wars and instabilities in different regions globally that affects the global players. So where can we start?
Thank you very much, Ivana, for the generous introduction. Thank you, everyone, the distinguished audience, for being here, and the Delphi Forum for inviting me. I think, first and foremost, there is a massive crisis of trust. We have fake news, we have fake platforms, the narratives are run by mega giants, tech giants with an agenda. And their agenda isn't peace. And we need to reverse that. And that, I think, we need to first and foremost acknowledge that. Whereas you and I grew up in war zones and listened to the radio, we heard, what was happening. Yes, it was a certain narrative. We maybe just heard one side of the story, but we certainly were not given fake facts. And now the young generation and those who don't have the knowledge to decipher what is fake and what isn't, they follow on the various platforms, be it Twitter or Instagram or Facebook or TikTok, and there's plenty of others. They follow one, two narratives, and they believe that what they are following is their truth. And that is very, very complicated. And we really need to address that, I think, first and foremost. And I think there's plenty of sort of innovation around, and there was much discussion in the Delphi forum about the role of AI and how to use AI constructively, but for me that would be the #1 priority, because if you look at Russia and you look at what the Russians are putting out every day to their audience, and no wonder that they think that the Ukrainians are, I don't know, I don't want to put words in the mouth of Putin, but if you are fed a certain narrative every day, and that's what you see. We don't see also in the media coverage, we see very divisive programs, by and large. I know you're a brilliant journalist yourself, but by and large, we don't see any programs that are aimed at bridging. The title of this panel is Bridging the Divides, and if the media owners, again, there's a problem with ownership, of course, because if the ownership is if Putin owns the media, or Netanyahu owns the media, or Trump owns the media, or his cronies, then clearly the media isn't independent. And I think the struggle to get independent, forward-thinking, conciliatory mainstream media should be a top priority, because you need to get, for example, Israelis and Palestinians, or Russians and Ukrainians abroad, because of course it's not possible from within Ukraine and within Russia. The Russians will get arrested immediately. But you need to get forward-thinking, conciliatory, educated minds that can together discuss programs about how to resolve the conflict. So those are sort of just on the practical side. Then, of course, we need to move the force to the sort of citizens' assembly. Yesterday at the panel that the Democracy and Culture Foundation organized, and I see Calypso here in the audience, George Papandreou, the former Prime Minister of Greece, proposed a 4th pillar of democracy. So we know we have the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary, and he proposed a 4th pillar of a citizens' assembly, getting power into the community. And I think, and then one of the panelists from Ecuador said that in Ecuador it already exists, and it's a successful endeavor. So we need to look at how we're building the societies, because there is a shift from democracy to autocracy. The shift is rapid, and it's a very dangerous one. And Henri correctly said we don't quite know where the ripple effects are. But in order to reverse the shift, we need to educate, and we need to be true to our values. And in order for the young generation, I have 2 young children, and when when Bashar al-Assad, both Assads were monsters, but when Bashar al-Assad was bombing his own population with chemical weapons, it's very hard when you think a child is asleep and to keep everything. My child walked into the room and he said, "What's happening? And who's that?" And we said, "It's the president of Syria." And he said, and he was very, very young, so that's 2. And he said, "That's not a president, that's a monster." And that was a child's spontaneous reaction. He said, "Those are not people." And then when we asked him when he was sort of a little older, 5 or 6, said, "What do you want to do?" Someone asked him, not me, "What do you want to do when he grows up?" He said, "Oh, I would like to set up an international foundation that will deal with all the people who are wrongly imprisoned." So and then he said, I don't know where he got the data, not from me, 75% are apparently illiterate. So that's where the education comes from. We can go on to the practical, I don't want to take too much time, so the 3 suggestions thus far that we need to focus on, there's a lot more. Generally, we need to shift the focus to the people, because the shift will come, it will be from the ground up, and the question really needs to be of how do we empower the communities to be true to their values, to democratic values, and group them together so they can become a strong force. Thank you.
Mr. Asaad al-Shamlan, your region has been troubled since the end of Second World War, and we are now seeing Trump's new idea on Middle East. He placed basically Riyadh as a location where Russians and Americans meet. You have the world is still waiting how the rapprochement of Israel and Saudis will, at the end, be delivered or not, considering the situation in Gaza. The world is still waiting to see how Trump administration will address Iran, and we have Syria as a complete new state of affairs there. So how do you see this new era for Middle East, and can we bridge this, not divides, but horrors and war crimes and worst atrocities that we seen in this state affairs through Abraham Accords or some other model that is expected from now on?
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you very much. And thank you very much all for coming. The last day of conference is always a challenge to have audience, so many thanks. Now, there are lots of issues to unpack here, so if I forget one or two, please remind me and I'm happy to engage with. Let me first start with the first idea that was introduced at this panel, and in reference to Gramsci's famous quote. But let us remember that this Gramscian conception only makes sense when you have an organic crisis. So he linked it with an organic crisis, which is not a usual crisis where a society, he was thinking of societies rather than international systems, they experience multiple kind of crises, and they come together, and then you have organic crisis where the old order cannot sustain itself. Now, I want to say, and this sounds a little bit optimistic, but I can defend it. It's not optimistic, it's realistic. We are not at such a state in the international system. We are not at an organic crisis. The international system, international global system is under considerable strains, but not an organic crisis in the way that the Gramscian conception understands it. Now, people say that we might revert now to a Hobbesian world, a world of all against all, but I think they forget one thing, that for Hobbes, this is not something to be celebrated. This is a problem to be overcome. And the whole thing about Hobbes is how to overcome this state of nature. So here also I have an entity to say, we cannot live without rules. The idea that although the rules now that govern the international system, clearly in trade, but in international law, etc., are under huge strain, we cannot do without it. So there is no other alternative but to have a dialogue and engagement. It's not like we have a different alternative, because a Hobbesian world is a state of nature. Even for the strong is unlivable. So there is no other alternative than to engage in a dialogue which is a prelude to construct, either defend existing rules which are valid or construct new rules. For example, AI you were referring to, that needs obviously international governance. We cannot live without that. So I think we are in a challenging period where we need to have a creative thinking, but rooted in the historical experience that we are in, which is a one of a need for coexistence, not only coexistence, but cooperation and engagement. Now, regarding the thing that you were referring to, I think you were quoting a journalist, an American journalist.
Yes, Breitbart correspondent.
I have a reservation about this. I would say this is a diagnosis and a point of view. It's not a, I have a problem with that. You see, it's so America-centric. It is basically saying that you see Saudi Arabia playing this pivotal role. We are behind the scenes pushing them and orchestrating all the... No, that's incorrect. I think anyone who looked at Saudi foreign policy particularly over the past 5 years, especially, will see that there has been a concerted effort from the Saudi leadership to position itself to have a position of being the conciliatory, you see, and that has to do with reasons of Saudi Arabia itself. The cornerstone of contemporary Saudi Arabia, current Saudi Arabia, and with that the foreign policy of Saudi Arabia, this is the major goal, the strategic goal, is how to remain and enhance your position as a G20 economy. You know, it's not about, other things come later, you know, the idea of being the leader of Islamic world, etc. I know some Saudis will find that's a bit astonishing to say, but I can defend it. The main thing is to continue to be and enhance your position. Now, if you are now number 16 or 17, you want to be number 15 or number 14 as a G20 economy, and that through going through what is called the 2030 vision, which will be followed by 2040 vision. So everything is to serve that. And I think Saudi Arabia, being in a position between Russia and Ukraine, if you look at the Saudi position on the war in Ukraine, it tried to have an even-handed policy. Saudi did not condemn, well, it condemned Russia and the Security and the UN resolution, unlike, for example, Israel, which at that time voted, abstained from that, but it also at the same time, if you like, opposed the Russian invasion by supporting Ukraine. And there was a huge, a considerable humanitarian and developmental aid to Ukraine, and you can quote President Zelensky, other, you know, they are very grateful for the Saudi position. So it was already in a good position to play such a role. It's not a question of a reflection of an American position. I think I should stop here. We can go to the other subject matter later. Thank you.
I will start the podcast because there is so much we need to do. So this is my effort from Delphi Forum, because I'm watching at the time. I'm watching at the audience. 80% of our audience, I don't know if camera is having this because this will be online, are young people. Young people who've been coming here to Delphi as I've been coming for a lot of years. And what both Henri and Nomi and Asaad said is this gap and these new realities that our futures will not be the same as their futures, because this is their futures and their fights. So looking at them, listening to everything that you all map, I'll then refer back to communications in international relations, bottom-up approach in peace building, and technologies. And first question, because you all look at the times we need to be a little bit quizzish. Henri, you've mentioned already AI will fundamentally change all our relations, international relations, and this. What's your message to them and what you're thinking, how this will apply to our subject?
So, look, we are at the beginning of the development of AI, and it's moving at an incredible speed. So it's going to be very difficult to predict, because we don't maybe even have the ability to predict, in the sense that even corporate leaders who are involved in this don't know what will come next. So what I had in mind was that when you think about major breaks, by breaks I mean positive breaks, we've had, probably the most important one we've had was the Industrial Revolution. Right? The Industrial Revolution completely reorganized the way we work, we live. Right? People moved into the cities. People were becoming more efficient. You could produce more food, and you could produce other things like cars and et cetera, et cetera. I'm wondering if the AI one day, new generations, actually your grandchildren probably of the young people here, will one day look back and say, the AI revolution was the equivalent of the Industrial Revolution, that it will change the way we organize everything. If you, I want to quote two people who are a little bit different from each other. Karl Marx, I think it was in the Communist Manifesto, I don't remember exactly where, he said that his vision of the future person was somebody who would not have to suffer the indignity of the division of labor, that one day he or she could be a fisherman, another day, and I'm playing with his words, I don't remember them exactly, or be an intellectual or be a factory worker. John Maynard Keynes actually said that the future he envisioned was one in which people would work maybe 1 or 2 days a week, that even the concept of time would actually change. Both of these, by the way, when you think about both of these quotations, so to say, they are transformative. They're as transformative in vision as the Industrial Revolution was compared to the agrarian culture we had. So the thing what to think about is whether AI is really going to change the way we organize society, whether it's going to make things better. But remember, the Industrial Revolution also made something else very efficient, the killing of people. That you could actually, when you think about it, it's not just the bullets, it's not just the tanks, but the concentration camps, right? That you could kill millions of people in ovens. I mean, this is something, so any such new development will have its both positive and negative consequences, and it's a question of knowing, controlling it. So we do have, however, as human beings, the experience of the first transition, the Industrial Revolution. So as the AI changes our lives, we should be prepared for its negative consequences as well as positive.
Division, Nomi, you've mentioned mistrust, you've mentioned participation. We have huge gap. European Parliament, there is 2 people out 721 MPs, 2 people younger than 30. International action, before we witnessed global movements for this, against this, and nature of leadership. We now have a little bit mightish people on the positions in big powers. You talked a lot in your life about female leadership. So to put this map together, mistrust, lack of participation in this regard, possibilities of international action, and nature of leadership in bridging this divide, what will your advice be to these guys who will take over?
So to the audience, I see, as Ivana said, the young audience, predominantly young, I think first and foremost, believe in yourselves and believe in the power that you have, because every single one of us has, their own signature and their own power, and every single one of you, no matter what industry you're in, can make a difference. And I'm convinced of that. And that's really, really important to remember. And on the days that you feel a little low and, not going to vote, or, oh God, no, this person was elected again, create something. Start it small, just with your groups. It can just be a soiree, just debates and stuff. Publish something online. It's the creation of trends can happen very quickly. You only need statistics, historically this is proven through research, 3.5% of a population can change. It's those that have a dream. And don't fear the dream. Dream big and be courageous. And that's what's the most important thing, because at the moment it's the extremes that are taking over because they were better organized with their dream. So I would say don't lose hope. Invest in whichever industry you're in. You see things that are wrong, write about it, and try to change it. Don't ever, 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 ever give up. That's what I would say. Believe in the grouping. It's really important to work in coalitions. So whatever industry you're in, and especially the techie people, and there are a lot of them in the room I see, really important to try to see how to work with AI. As Henri said, it could be very negative and it could be very positive. And to the lawyers in the room, of course, we need an international treaty, a new one of governance that isn't just the EU. And there's some of us who are working on it to make sure that there is an outreach. But there is always a way forward, and I do believe that. And I've been, as Ivana said, really in the deep of things, and deep in mass graves and morgues, and not pleasant places, and I always see the light. And I just want to maybe quote one of the deceased 7th October victims, whose sons, Maozi Non and Mageni Non, have launched a platform with Palestinian partners. She wrote and she said, and they are carrying out the mission. Dream big, be courageous, and that's where the change will come from. And I really believe it. I'm putting my hand on my heart. It was a spontaneous move. I really believe it. And that would be my main. Always look at the narrative of the other. Put yourself in their shoes. You know, whether it's at home, whether it's your boyfriend, girlfriend, you know, whatever, parents, children, always look at things from the other perspective. And you don't need to agree with what has happened, but you need to make the effort to understand how we got there. And it's always complex. You don't get to a fight, whether it's at home, whether it's a community, whether it's in the country, or whether it's internationally. It's all the same principle. There is a lot there to unpack, and there's a lot there to unpack in order to repair. But we always need to research, study, and be aware of the fact that there are different narratives around. And once the recognition comes, it's much easier then to try to move forward. That would be my, be true to yourselves and be strong. Be strong at the core.
So we have like multiple layers of messages here. Professor Shamlan, you've mentioned G20. You've mentioned Hobbes and, you know, time we live in, homo homini lupus, where someone needs to go beyond that and create new spaces for cooperation. Where do you see them? We have talks about UN reform for ages. Are there these regional coalitions? Is it G20? What are these multilateral forums in the multipolar world that can, you know, establish new ground for bridging these divides that are so many out there?
Okay. Well, clearly now, many of these forums are almost reaching a point of paralysis. G20 is a clear example. But I would say that what we will witness, and not in the distant future, the emergence of a different kind of coalitions, different kind of multilateral frameworks. And what we will have today is a very opportune moment for more regionalization. We can see it in Europe, for example, you know, the push for more European integration, particularly in terms of defense and foreign policy, never been greater. Whether that in the end will result into that, we don't know. But there is a push for more regionalization. We see it in the ASEAN. And definitely, I personally expect, for example, the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council, which comprises the 6 Arab Gulf states, will be a noticeable push for more integration in the future. So we will, as I said, a state of nature kind of is just unlivable, even for the strong. You cannot, in the end, although at the moment those who have strength feel that they can be in a better advantage if they are not constrained by any rules. But in the end, you even for the strong, you need rules in order to make things predictable, etc. So there will be some will be revived, some will disappear, of course, but new modalities will come out. So that's what I would say to this. Do you want me to speak about the question of you asked me about the Abraham Accords and Saudi Arabia and normalization? If you want me to, I am very happy to do that.
I will have the last round because all three of you in one way or the other dealt and are dealing with Middle East, and I think maybe it's important to send this message from here. You know, we will not solve all the crises, but each from your own perspective. So, Professor Shamlan, I would just make this finishing line. with that question. Abraham Accords at the moment, after 7th of October, after Israel's response in Gaza, after Trump's idea for Gaza, and after he said that, Riyadh has been chosen as a place for peace negotiations for a reason, because they think you will be the players of the players there. Where do we stand?
Okay. I think in order for us to understand this moment today about the possibilities of normalization.
Just watch at the clock, so remember, two of them need to go shortly in this time and solve the wars.
Okay, well, there is no, okay, so let's leave history by the window. But you see, it's impossible to understand complex issues without contextualize them. But anyway, it doesn't matter. I'll just telegraph things. The idea of the Abrahamic Accords, let me say, Saudi Arabia's position seems to be crystal clear, that there will be no normalization with Israel without a clear path to a Palestinian state or a Palestinian state. So I don't know how they make it clearer. People still insist that, well, is there something between the lines? No, it's an empty space between the lines. There is nothing. It is as it states. But when you look at the so-called Abrahamic Accords, actually they have nothing to do with peace. If you look at them, there are three parties to it. There is the Arab states, for example, UAE, Bahrain, let's say UAE, you have Israel, you have the United States. Each has its own logic for signing that accord, which has nothing to do with achieving peace between the Arabs and Israelis. For the Gulf, for the Bahrain and UAE, the motivation is that they can have, through this accord, a better leverage in the United States, and especially in Congress, over the administration. So that's the motivation. For the Israelis, and this is very interesting, it goes back actually to the mid-90s when Netanyahu, Likud party in general, they were opposed to the Oslo Accords. And they say the whole idea before and still is that to achieve peace you have to have land for peace. They say no. We have to have reciprocity. Of course, reciprocity is a nice Christian concept, but they meant different thing about peace for peace. They give us peace, we give them peace. Land has nothing to do with it. So the idea is that you have peace without giving back the occupied land. And this is what the Abraham Accords achieved to the Israelis, to the right in Israel. They say to their local audience, look, we can have peace with the Arabs without conceding the land. We have now peace with UAE, with Bahrain, with Sudan, etc. Now for the Americans, the logic is this, it appeals to the American public opinion. We are marching towards achieving peace in the Middle East. For the three, it has nothing to do with achieving real peace on the ground, and that's why things get even worse after the Abrahamic Accords than before. And this is, Saudi Arabia saying, we are not interested in playing this game. If you want to have a peace in this region, there has to be land for peace, which Europe agree with, Asia agree with, Latin America, the whole world agree with. Today, the only one who is opposing it is Israel, with the tacit approval of some European countries, Germany, etc., and the Trump administration.
So we will need a special Middle East panel. This was unfortunately not it. We thought it was the whole one, but we needed to talk about international architecture. Nomi will take 2 minutes because they took us 2 minutes. You told me that you think that neither Hamas represents people in Gaza, neither Fatah, the Palestinians in the West Bank, nor Netanyahu, Israelis. So where do we start?
First of all, we start by recognizing the fact that the Hamas government was elected democratically in 2006. Abbas was elected democratically in the West Bank even earlier. I mean, at that time, it was sort of all of Palestine, and Netanyahu was elected democratically. But they formed a government that is not acting democratically, and they formed the government that is not acting in the interests of the people. So Netanyahu, for example, has, at least 70% of the population today would like to see him out. and would like to see the war end. Hamas haven't served the interests of the people of Gaza. We've got over 50,000 dead, not to mention well over 100,000 wounded and missing, and all of the population in Israel and Gaza and the West Bank is deeply traumatized. In the West Bank, because Israel is also acting extremely aggressively there. So the question is, what do we do about it? And we go back to what we discussed earlier, is how do we empower the people? So, for example, in May next month, there's going to be a peace conference of more than 60 groups that are pro-Israeli-Palestinian peace, and that is a first. And it's a first in the sense that it is a unity, and that's what I said about starting in your community, starting in your home, starting with individual work on yourself, being at peace and harmony with yourself, really is important, because then you have the power. You're much stronger. Once you find your inner sort of peace, it's very, it's step by step to get to home peace, community peace, country peace, world peace. You know, it's all part of the same trajectory. And I think it's very important to recognize that. And that's beginning to happen in Israel. Yesterday there was a letter of the vast majority of pilots said they would no longer fly. You know, there are lots and lots and lots and lots and no longer fly over Gaza, bomb Gaza. The issue really is the people are rebelling and they need support. So it's about getting the power back to the people by creating the structure and infrastructure and being active. I mean, you know, it's very important to be active and even when things go wrong, to learn how to overcome them. And I do believe in Gaza it will change. Of course, there's the international, you know, we've got a crisis of leadership, and we can discuss, you get more women into negotiations, the issue will be resolved. Not, you know, it's not a sort of formula, you know, 1, 2, 3, but it's again, there's a lot of research to show that when you have women negotiators, they think differently. Not every woman, but there are some brilliant women negotiators, and you need, you know, you've got a crisis in leadership where, as you said, you know, the monsters leading certain countries. But you need to engage, and I just want to end on a practical note. Yesterday there was a meeting, Chinese and Russians and Europeans and Arab countries to implement the Egyptian-led Arab Peace Initiative. For those who don't know, that's the counter-plan to Trump's plan to oust all the Palestinian population and create a Riviera. In one line, it's a plan to end the war and reconstruct Gaza. But in order to get to a Palestinian state, which is what Asaad mentioned, it's the only way to end the Middle East conflict. Well, in practical terms, that's what the Peace for Push is. It's a push to get there, to get Israel to recognize that it's in Israel's national interests to get the Palestinians to oust their, you know, to have a technocratic government, which is what the Egyptian Arab League document proposed. And of course, you know, I discussed more the role of individuals, but of course the international institutions and the leaders have a role, and it's a question of knowing how to work with the current leaders. And it's important to work with all the current leaders because they are in power. And if you don't work with them, they will spoil whatever you're thinking. So you don't need to like the person you're negotiating with. You never like, you know, you're always negotiating with the enemy, but you need to understand that they're part of the solution.
As they will take over, Henri, can Middle East survive without US or not? Just to conclude, 2 sentences.
Look, the US is a necessary actor, but I have a completely different conception of this. I mean, I think the problem in the conflict, at least the Arab-Israeli conflict, is in the past, and both sides will have to come to terms with their past and face each other. Without that, nothing's going to happen.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you all. Conceptual and a little bit of concrete in the Middle East, and I think we gave to the young audience something to think about. Thank you all for your time in the last day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.